It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So my friends, what's going on with our local hospital? Many things are happening, exciting things. I keep telling you, it's like every time we do a health show, it just the bar keeps going up and up and up. Well, we got one of the big guys on today, good friend of mine, well known in the area, Dr. Anthony Valente. He's the Chief Medical Officer. And Tony, we have a lot of things to talk about today.
We sure do.
These are all good things, aren't they?
All good things, I'm happy to say.
Well, it's nice to see you.
You too.
Okay, and I could tell you just had some experiences up there with the family in a couple weeks ago, but staff was fantastic. Me, example, finger, I had a problem. They were fantastic. Really, the emergency department and the pressure they're under all the time and to maintain the cool that they have, Anthony. It's just, it's amazing. Well, all right, when I was there, I saw a lot of renovations. Give us an update of what's happening in the renovations.
Okay, well, probably when you were there, if you were in the hospital at all, on the hospital floors, you probably noticed that some of them have already been renovated. We're going through the tower, and one floor at a time, obviously, because we have to keep the building open. So we have done the 3rd floor is completely redone, the 7th floor is completely redone, and we are currently working on the 5th floor. The 5th floor should be done, I believe, next week, and then we'll move down to the 4th floor. And the reason this is done in tandem like that is so that we can obviously just shuffle patients around, keep the building going while we remodel, each floor. So all the floors will be remodeled, including the OB unit, which is on the 2nd floor. And concurrently with that, you should soon be seeing a little bit more work being done out in the front of the hospital, which is where the emergency department will be enlarged to just close to about double its size right now.
Is that right?
We'll be going from about 10,000 square feet to the vicinity of 19,000 square feet. The new extension of that will be going out into the parking lot. And a new ambulance bay around the side. So we're real excited about that. That should be a real state-of-the-art emergency room, as I mentioned, almost doubling the size. And we see that as a real satisfier, if you will, for throughput. We outgrew our emergency room very soon after it was redone, and it was just redone back in the mid-2000s. So that was outgrown very, very quickly. So this hopefully will give us that edge that we need for supplying really good emergency medical services with a nice new modern enlarged facility.
Training and efficiency is always important, particularly when it comes to healthcare. Okay, so some of the things is that how is the certain things, how is that quality measured?
Okay, so what we do, Sam, with quality, basically, I mean, we live it every day. I mean, quality is obviously your #1 item. Quality, patient safety. They're the top of the list. But the way we measure it really is by keeping a very close eye on multiple metrics. And most of these metrics are reported to somebody. Typically it's CMS or it's the Hospital Association of Pennsylvania, somebody where these metrics have to be reported to, stored, and subsequently you'll get feedback on various metrics. And believe me, they're too numerous to mention. We don't have time on the show to actually get into all of them. But they range anywhere from how frequently somebody falls in your building to how often they get an infection, whether they get a complication. There's just multiple metrics that are measured on a daily basis. Most of these are sent in at least quarterly, some of them even more frequently than that.
Okay, so does that include that when, for example, when I left there, it was an emergency room, I mean, nothing critical, but then I got a thing in the mail from John Fletcher saying, fill out, how is this, how is that? Survey.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be a patient satisfaction survey, which is also a very closely followed metric that we use. That's not necessarily the metrics that I'm referring to as far as patient safety goes or whatever, but that is certainly a patient satisfaction survey.
With those quality measures then, okay, so then how do you use them?
Okay, well, so what we do is we, regardless of where we get ranked or where we fall compared to other hospitals when these metrics are sent into whichever surveying body you want to send or you need to send them into, we look at them internally and we we have pretty high standards for ourselves of where we want to land with these metrics. How many infections we have per year, how many urinary infections that they get, how many infections they get from a central venous catheter, an intravenous line, how many surgical site infections we have. This is monitored very closely, and we have benchmarks that we want to make sure we hit, regardless of where we fall, statewide, nationally, or whatever. It's obviously nice to be recognized statewide and nationally as well, but we also monitor this very closely internally.
All right, so this is a dumb question, but how do these quality initiatives and measures matter to the community and to the patients of LVHN?
Okay, so, well, I guess, just intuitively, you want to go to a hospital where you are sure you are getting as good a care as you can get. And people these days are fairly mobile. People can go in their car and they can go here, they can go to Wilkes-Barre, they can go to Allentown, they can go to, wherever. And so you need to have a product, if you will, that is as good or better than they can get anywhere. And in my mind, if we are not able to deliver a product as good as another facility, then they shouldn't come to our facility. I wouldn't want to take one of my family members or myself or whatever. If I knew I can get better care somewhere else, I would go. So I think that's something that patients should keep in mind. These metrics are readily available. They're publicly reported, and certainly I would want to make sure that the facility I'm going to is living up to a particular standard. So
you have these standards, okay, and many years ago, when I started in 1994, we have, when I say we have great doctors and great medical care, we really do, Tony. I mean, you see it all the time. But we have sometimes before, many years ago, the perception is, well, you got to get out of town, you got to get out of town. You remember that. Thank God throughout the years, people begin to see, well, we have an outstanding hospital here, okay? I've done work in Philadelphia hospitals with surgeries when we tape. And I've seen some of the major hospitals not as great as you would think, and I'm not going to mention any names. When you know what I'm saying? So we come up here, we're very fortunate. So, folks, I'm talking to Dr. Anthony Valente, who's the Chief Medical Officer at the Lehigh Valley Hazleton Hospital. And when we come back, we're going to talk about, okay, quality initiatives and achievements at LVHH, and what are they? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 247SSPTV.com. Now, download the app, search SSPTV. All of our 21 local neighborhood shows are on here, shows such as we're doing right now. Dr. Anthony Valente is my guest, and he is the Chief Medical Officer at Lehigh Valley Hospital here in Hazleton. Before we get into the quality initiatives, and so people know how these things are developed, we talked a little bit about perception and being a native of this area, okay, for many, many years. I told you since I was one of the first, always promoting our local doctors, our local healthcare, our nurses, etc. But that perception thing, Anthony, always has a concern, doesn't it?
It certainly does, Sam, and to some degree, I think it's overplayed. I read an article in the, it was in the a letter to the editor the other day in the newspaper. I don't know if you got to read it. It was by somebody from Canada who had apparently broken down somewhere in the area, and they talked about the people of Hazleton and what they did for them and how nice they were treated and what have you. And the gist of the article was that they said, why are people from Hazleton so down on themselves and down on the area? They thought the area was wonderful, the people were wonderful, and that resonated with me because one of the things we notice when we get a lot of folks traveling through here on 80 and 81 that come to our hospital when they need care. And when we get their surveys back that you mentioned in the first segment of this, they're always glowing. I can't honestly remember the last time we got a survey back from somebody who was passing through here that had nothing but wonderful things to say about the hospital. And yet we'll find, and as reported, there's a lot of issues that you've probably heard about our emergency room and whatever, negative comments about that and about the hospital and negativity. And I think a lot of it is harking back to that same kind of principle, if you will. People are down just on Hazleton in and of itself. And it bothers me to some degree, especially with the emergency department, because I think you've seen what those people do.
Absolutely.
And how hard they work.
Yes.
And I read over and over again, well, I waited so long and they took this guy first before me and yada, yada, yada. But what they don't read, and what you don't read in the paper, and what you don't see in these comments, is what I see and what I hear about is the folks that come in whose lives are saved. We all know about the young gentleman who was found frozen in a snowbank. Dr. Coleman worked on him for over 2 hours. His core temperature was below, it could not be recorded. He's alive and well today. We've had local people who have had sudden cardiac death and came to the emergency room and are alive today. I just read a case of a gentleman who came into the ED and basically had a cardiac arrest in the waiting room.
Yes.
They worked on him on the floor of the waiting room and revived him, and he went down to Cedar Crest. So it's a little bit disappointing to me that people find the negativity in how long they're waiting in a waiting room that could conceivably save your life and has done such remarkable things for people. To hear, well, I waited so long. I mean, not that we want to see people wait, but keep it in perspective. These people say they do miracles every day. I know it because I see it and I read them. I read the cases. And some of them bring tears to your eyes when you think that these people are back in town working, walking.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
There's no question about that. Yeah, and again, my wife was a registered nurse. She understands that when someone goes in an emergency room, there's a triage system.
Absolutely.
And the triage system, explain before we get in, what the triage system is.
Triage means you are seen in an order that treats people based on their severity of illness. So the sicker you are, the faster you go in. It's just that simple. And that's unfortunately the way emergency medicine has to be practiced, because I mean, there's no appointments. It's just walking in the door and you got to be seen. And
I have found every time, and I hope I don't have to go there, but I mean, they have been absolutely reception, and and then you have people yelling at them, and yet they have to maintain their.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I say, God bless them. Okay, let's talk about quality initiatives and achievements. Okay, we're talking about what's the MI Alert program.
MI Alert is a really neat process that we've been doing now for about 13 years or so. That's a process where as soon as we realize that you're having a heart attack, in layman's terms, you're having a heart attack, a whole process gets put into place where everybody kind of responds. Everything happens like this. Your intravenous lines are placed, you're given medications, your labs are drawn, your EKG is done, your chest x-ray is done, and if need be, you are transferred for cardiac catheterization. We have it down to where our fastest one, don't quote me on this, but I believe from the time they entered our facility door, where they walk in and they say, I'm having chest pain, to the time they had what's the balloon that they open up the artery, the time they had that placed down at Cedar Crest, including the flight, the whole thing was 41 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
It's amazing, isn't it?
That is.
I believe that was the record, but as I said, don't quote me on that, but I'm in the ballpark, 41 minutes.
Your stroke center certification, I think, is second to none.
It's impeccable. That's correct.
Let's talk about that.
We're a primary stroke center, and we've been so for a number of years. I believe it's 2008, if my memory serves me correctly. We were just recertified, and we've done very well with that. That's a process where you will receive very state-of-the-art care. You come in with signs and symptoms of stroke. We have a whole process that you go through, just like the MI Alert process, where you are administered medications. Everything happens, again, everything's happening concurrently, so we're cutting down on time. So that if need be, we either can give you a medication to try to open up the blockage, or once again, get you down to the comprehensive stroke center, which in our case it's Cedar Crest, where they can do an intervention if necessary. And for different types of patients, different interventions may or may not be required.
Your trauma center received a level 4 trauma center designation. What does that mean?
Level 4, there's multiple levels. Level 1 is the highest. We're obviously not capable of being a level 1, but for a hospital our size, level 4 is perfect. And what that basically means is that when you come into our hospital, when you're designated a trauma alert, once again, the same process. It generates a whole response team that comes to the bedside. Multiple processes are put into place, and then you are triaged either to stay at our facility if you can, or if need be, you're transferred to a larger center for more detailed care.
When you receive awards, like the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, you get with the guidelines on the stroke program, you received some awards. What were they?
Well, as you can see there, Sam, we've received awards, and what's more important is I think you see the longevity of the awards. Where we're Target, we're Gold Plus, Target, and you'll notice there one of them is 8 and one of them is 4 on the CHF and the stroke.
The Stroke Gold Plus is 8 years, and the Target stroke recognition is 4
years, right? And the reason that is because they didn't have the Target.
Okay.
We've gotten them every year we can get them. Yeah. The bottom line was 8 years in a row we got the other one, 4 years in a row we got the other one, because that's when they came out. And we're very proud of that. And I think that's the part that I bring out to folks. It's not that it's easy, not easy, but it's a lot easier to get an award. It's harder to maintain that, year after year after year. That's where the rubber meets the road.
That's right.
Is maintaining the process.
Yep. American Heart Association, get with the guidelines, heart failure program, the Heart Failure Gold Plus Award, 8 consecutive years.
Correct.
Target heart failure recognition, 4 consecutive years.
Correct.
Okay. Now, before we go for break, U.S. News and World Report 2016 listed one of the best hospitals.
Correct. You'll find that in there. I believe it comes out in July, if I'm not mistaken, sometime in the summer, and you'll find this listed in there as well.
The interesting thing is that when these awards are earned, and you maintain them. Folks, I'm talking to Dr. Anthony Valente, Chief Medical Officer at the Lehigh Valley Hazleton Hospital here. A lot of things happening, great things happening, great for our area. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Great news for our healthcare here in Greater Hazleton. Dr. Anthony Valente joins me today. He's the Chief Medical Officer. We're talking about a lot of great things that are happening, folks. Remember, you can watch all of our shows 24/7 on our app, SSP TV. Now, if you don't have cable, and there's a lot of people that want to watch the show, particularly our health shows with the Lehigh Valley Hospital, we go to the YouTube, download YouTube, search SSP TV, watch all the shows, no charge. You should have cable, and also to translate it into Spanish. So you have that opportunity. Tony, a lot of things happening. Before we get to a major announcement that you're making here, they're just health grade awards. Some of them, what are they?
Well, as you can see there, Sam, we've received several in the past. We've received the Health Grade Award for Patient Safety, as well as the Health Grades Award for Pulmonary Care several years. That is kind of a metric that's out there, that it's still used. You can search it online, and they basically rate hospitals on performance, and it's something that we're pretty proud of.
Now, the biggie, the biggie. Okay, it's called Leapfrog.
Leapfrog.
Leapfrog. Okay,
right.
So tell me what that is.
I know, kind of a quirky name, isn't it? Well, Leapfrog is actually an interesting concept. Leapfrog was developed many years ago, probably 20 years ago or so, and it was developed actually by big business. IBM, Hewlett-Packard, I think GE was in on multiple large corporations. And what they did was they set up a process where they looked into healthcare systems. Because remember, these folks are paying a lot of money for health benefits for their employees. So they set this process up where they would evaluate healthcare facilities as well as organizations, and they would pick the best ones. And it was a ranking system, if you will, so that, I guess in layman's terms, they didn't want to pay for champagne and get beer. Kind of that process. So they wanted to make sure their healthcare dollars were being spent wisely and that they were getting quality care. So they developed this process called Leapfrog, which is where they survey hospitals and they assign a Leapfrog score, or a grade, if you will, to facilities based on multiple metrics. okay, which there's too many of them to actually get into. Time won't allow us. But there are multiple metrics that are looked at, some of which we've already touched on previously: hospital infections and surgical site infections and catheter-based infections and falls and critical care and outcomes and that type of thing. There's a laundry list. And then you're all kind of put into a curve, if you will, and then they grade. They will, based on the slope of the curve, they will divide it up into a grade. And you can get anything from a D to an A. And I'm happy to report that we've recently found out that we're an A, which is the highest Leapfrog grade that you can get. And it's a wonderful accomplishment for a small community hospital. It truly is. As you could imagine, in a grading system like this, a lot of these systems actually benefit larger institutions. There's a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more room for air, if you will. In a small hospital, there's not a lot of room for air because your volumes aren't as big. So it's really a wonderful accomplishment for a small community hospital to achieve an A rating from Leapfrog.
You know, when Jack Palance was alive and we were partners, we would do a show. And ever after the show, he would say, well, how was the show? And I would say, geez, I think it was great. He says, okay, now, Sam, the next show, I want you to do 10% better. And every show, I want you to do 10% better. And I look at your hospital, and I see how, you know, all the accomplishments and the awards, which are great. But those awards have to come from somebody. They have to come from merits and like you said, merit-based, et cetera. And I think that's the really great thing, okay, because they didn't say, okay, well, John Fletcher's a nice lady, let's throw him an award, or Tony Valente's a nice guy. That doesn't happen that way. Correct. You're talking healthcare. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. And you know, everybody's on the same playing field. With Leapfrog, you're in with hospitals large and small. And I think it really speaks for the medical staff and all the other colleagues of the hospital in every department that pull together, because you can't do this. This is a case of, you know, they say the chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
That's right.
And it's true. It's very true in healthcare. You know, you could have very strong departments, but if you've got weak departments, that's as strong as you're going to be. You're only as strong as your weakest link. That's very, very true. And so to achieve that type of a grade, that tells you that everybody is really, really bringing their A game, if you will, to work. And I'm just so proud of the medical staff and, as I said, all the colleagues of the hospital, because everybody, this is really a team effort to achieve that. It's not something that you can say, well, we did it because of this. We did it because of everybody in all the departments.
You mentioned something when one of my relatives up there in a very serious case, and I saw the emergency nurses, and I saw how the compassion that they have, yet under the stress that they were on. Okay.
Hugely stressful.
Yeah, and yet being able to cope with the family, and yet trying to save that person. You know, I'd love to be able to go up there and do a day in the life of what, you know, and just film different things. I know there's different things you have, but just so the community, right, people could see what these people go through.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
When you see it, you know, it's like when I like watching Chicago Med, but I'm sure most of that, I don't know how true that is.
It's Hollywoodized,
believe me. I could imagine. But it's entertaining. But however, it's the same concept when you see them coming in with emergencies. But, you know, I'll tell you, Dr. Valente, you know, you guys have a lot to be proud of. You have a great team, all the medical people, even the licensed practical nurses, the RNs, the doctors, the people who are cleaning the hospital up.
Absolutely.
It's a great
That's
it's a
where
great
the rubber
team.
meets the road.
Yeah,
that's
you know,
exactly right.
And I can see why. And I'm always excited to promote, you know, our local medical facilities. Folks, you know, I've told you many times, check them out. You know, there are a lot of doctors come here because they want to get out of the city. They want to come here and enjoy what they have. And you know what? It's funny you should say about that letter. When I talk to you doctors that you're getting on, and they say, what a beautiful area we have.
Yeah.
They love the area.
The folks that we've recruited.
And people here are saying they're down on our own. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Always nice seeing you, Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Tell my buddy John Fletcher I said hi.
I will absolutely do that.
All right, and I just wish you guys the best.
Thank
Folks, remember, information you need, the number is very simple, 501-4-LVH. if you want to make an appointment with our providers or any information you need, go to their website. Also, download our app. You can watch this show anywhere in the world. We'll see you next time.